Steve Jobs runs Pixar and Apple at the same time. Elon Musk runs Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company simultaneously. Most people say focus on one thing, and the most successful people do the exact opposite thing. I want to tell you about the 1997. Steve Jobs had just returned to Apple after being fired 12 years earlier in his own company. Apple was 90 days from bankruptcy, and everybody was saying, Steve, save Apple, Steve, save Apple, focus, drop everything else. By dropping everything else, they meant he should drop Pixar. But he didn't. He kept running Pixar. In fact, Pixar was about to IPO while Apple was dying. Any rational person would have sold Pixar, poured everything into Apple, focused on one thing. But Steve Jobs did the opposite. He ran both companies. And here's what nobody talks about. Pixar taught him what Apple needed. At Pixar, Jobs learned storytelling, how to create emotional connection with audiences, how to build product people didn't know they needed but couldn't live without once they had had them. That learning transferred to Apple, and the iMac launch in 1998 wasn't a tech announcement, it was a story. Think different. And that came from Pixar. By 2026, Jobs sold Pixar to Disney for $7.4 billion US. Apple was worth $72 billion. Running both didn't split his focus. It multiplied his impact. Your multiple identities aren't distractions. They are actually your leverage if you stack them correctly. David Epstein wrote a book called Range, where he studied thousands of successful people across sports, music, business, and science. And here is what he found. Specialists peak early and plateau. Generalists peak later, but they go higher. He calls this the sampling period advantage. And people who try multiple things before specializing end up better than people who specialize from day one. That is what David found, not me. And let me give you the 3-layer identity stack. Layer 1 is the foundation identity. This is your stability, your current income source, the thing that pays bills while you build your business. For Jobs in 1985, that was Pixar, which he bought for $5 million from George Lucas and later sold for billions, as I told earlier. It wasn't his passion. It was cash flow while he figured out his next move. And the second layer is the learning identity. This is where you are actively building skill in an adjacent field. You are getting paid, but you are also learning something that will compound later. For Jobs, Pixar was his learning identity. He learned storytelling, he learned animation, he learned emotional narrative. Skills he'd never get at a computer company. And the third layer is the vision identity. And this is your long-term identity. This is your long-term bet, the thing you're building towards. It might not pay today, but it is where you are heading. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, that became his vision identity, saving the company, reinventing personal computing. And here is the key insight. Each layer teaches you something the other layers need. Jobs learned storytelling at Pixar. He applied it to Apple products launches. He learned 3D animation technology at Pixar. He applied it to iPhone's UI design. He learned how to build a creative culture at Pixar. He applied it to Apple's design team. The layers weren't separate. They were compounding. I want to give you an example. Elon Musk runs 4 companies: Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, which is what he uses for tunnels. People say he's unfocused, but what they don't know is that they are wrong. He is stacking. Tesla teaches him about batteries and energy. He applies that to SpaceX, which is the power systems for spacecraft. SpaceX, on the other hand, teaches him about manufacturing at scale and materials science. He applies that to Tesla, which is for gigafactories, Cybertruck steel. Neuralink teaches him about human-machine interfaces. He's already talking about applying that to Tesla, which is about brain-controlled cars. Each company is a learning layer that feeds the others, and that's not a distraction if you ask me. That is a strategy. Okay, I'll give the second example. Alexandria Cortex, before AOC, became the youngest woman elected to Congress. She was a bartender. People mocked this. She's just a bartender. She's not qualified. But here is what she learned bartending: how to read people, how to communicate across class lines, how to make complex ideas accessible, how to handle hostile people with grace. Those skills learned in a low status job, quote, made her one of the most effective communicators in modern politics. She can explain policy in TikTok videos better than senators with 30 years of experience. Her foundation identity, which was the bartending job, taught her cultural capital that her vision identity, which was a congresswoman, needed. And here is how you can build your stack. Step 1, map your current identities. I want you to take a pen and paper and write down everything you are doing right now. It could be your day job, it could be your side projects, it could be the skills you're learning, it could be the communities you're part of. I don't want you to put an end to it. Don't filter it. Don't judge yourself. Just write down the list. And then that takes you to step 2, which is to categorize by layer. So mark each one F, which is foundation, which is what pays your bills today, and L, which is your learning, building skills for tomorrow, and your V, which is your vision, long-term goals or bets. You should at least have one of each. If you don't, you are neither too scattered or learning no foundation, or too safe or foundation no vision. After step 2, I want you to enter to step 3, which is find the cross connections. This is the key. For each item, ask yourself, what am I learning here that applies to my other identities? Let me give you an example, because we're about examples. If you're working customer service for now, you're learning communication, you're learning problem solving, you're learning patience because you need patience. How does that apply to the business that you're actually building right now, which is your vision? If you're learning digital marketing, how does that apply to your current job, foundation, right? Or your long-term goals, which is your vision? Cross-check these things. Then step 4, deliberately transfer knowledge. Once per week, take one lesson from one identity and apply it to the other one. And I'll give you a scenario. I'll give you an example. You learned a presentation technique at your day job. Use that to do a video for your personal brand. If you learned audience psychology from creating your content, use it in your day job for your next client pitch. This is how Steve Jobs operated. He didn't separate Pixar and Apple in his mind. What he did was he constantly asked himself, what did I learn here that applies there? In Range by David Epstein, the book, he shares a study of Nobel Prize winners, and they are significantly more likely than other scientists to have artistic hobbies. They paint, they write poetry, they play instruments. You might be asking why, and that is because insights in one domain transfers to others. A physicist who plays jazz improvisation understands complex systems differently than a physicist who doesn't. Your multiple identities are not distractions. They are data sources, and data is the new oil. Each one teaches you something that makes the other one stronger. The people who say focus on one thing are usually people who plateau. They just never learn anything again. But people who master the stack, like Steve Jobs, like Musk, Oprah Winfrey, or even AOC, they don't choose, they compound. This week, have the task of mapping your identity stack, then identify one cross connection. One thing you learned in one area that you can apply in another, and then watch what happens. And I hope you learned something in this video. In the next video, I'm going to discuss how and why I almost built something nobody wanted, and the 5-question validation framework that prevents months of wasted work. Comment identity stack if you've mapped yours, or if you're going to map yours, then come to the section and tell us about it so we can actually look at it and tell you what's next.